All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to have with us today Professor Kenneth Jenkins from the Department of Electrical Engineering at Penn State University. Dr. Jenkins got his BS from Lehigh and MS and PhD from Purdue University. From 74 to 77, he was a research engineer. He started out as a research engineer at Lockheed Martin out in California. And then in 77, he joined the Department of Electrical Engineering at Urbana-Champaign, where he'd been there for 22 years prior to moving to Penn State as a department head in electrical engineering. His current research interests are in fault-tolerant DSP for highly scaled VLSI and adaptive and multidimensional signal processing, computer imaging, and bioinspired optimization algorithms for intelligent DSP. And he's the co-author of the Advanced Concepts in Adaptive Signal Processing book published by Kluwer in '96. He's a past associate editor of IEEE on Circuits and Systems and past president of the CAST Society. He also served on the board of the EE department heads of the U.S. EE department heads, and also as its president. He's a fellow of the IEEE. He got several awards, and I could spend the whole next 15 minutes reading all of them. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Krim. I would like to thank the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering here for hosting me for a week long of my sabbatical visit here, and also for scheduling me for the seminar today. And I thank Dr. Stansel for his help, and Dr. Philbrick, who is from the physics department, for hosting me as well. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about some current trends in adaptive systems, and I'm really kind of focused on adaptive digital signal processing. So it maybe has some application to adaptive control systems and so forth, but it won't be focused on that. And I did want to mention that the work I'm talking about really was coming from the work from my most recent two PhD students, Dan Kruzhensky, who is now a professor at Old Dominion University, and Dr. Chandra Radhakrishnan, who is a postdocing at the University of Illinois right now. So I wanted to just acknowledge that much of this work comes out of their dissertation work. I'm going to spend the time split a little bit. May I ask a show of hands of anybody who has taken or taught a course in adaptive signal processing? We got 1, 2, 3. Okay, quite a few. Maybe you've studied this within other contexts a little bit. But I thought that I should spend a little bit of time on presenting enough background so we get the terminology and the settings down. Okay, so those of you who know the subject well, just bear with me here for a few minutes. And then I want to move it onward to where we haven't moved as a technical community into nonlinear adaptive filtering. Okay, some of it exists and some of it is yet to exist. And then I want to move on into spend the bulk of the time on what I refer to here as bio-inspired optimization algorithms. And in some cases, the title said computational evolutionary algorithms. They do, in a large extent, come from biology concepts, and I want to create that. And I also want to spend a little bit of philosophical moments on trying to convince us that dipping out into other areas outside of the straight electrical and computer engineering can be very beneficial and exciting. And I think biology and the biosciences is one area where we have dipped heavily into that area, but there's much to do, and I think we'll talk about this. Okay, so in the beginning, okay, I'm not ever sure quite what the beginning is, but my beginning, as I recall, in 1959, Professor Bernard Woodrow of Stanford University and his PhD student Ted Hoff, they published a paper on what we'll call here as the least mean squares adaptive filtering algorithm. Okay, and that was a long time ago. That was before the computers on a chip existed. There was digital technology there, but this was the beginning of a lot of the things that we use in adaptive signal processing today. And I must tell you that I got interested in adaptive signal processing because I was working right beside Stanford at Lockheed and working with the local IEEE group, and somebody suggested that I should get Professor Woodrow over to talk about his work in this area. So I didn't know him, and he was a senior and I was a junior, and so I said to somebody who I worked with that knew him, what can I do to convince Dr. Woodrow to come and give the talk? And he said, well, it's very simple. Just read his most recently published paper in the proceedings. They kind of pointed it out to me. And when you call him up, tell him you read his paper and so forth. And I did that. I called him up, and he said, oh, you read my paper? Oh, great. You know, then when I asked him if he'd give the talk, he said, yeah, of course, I'll be over to give it. Well, that was kind of the first time I ever dipped into adaptive signal processing. And as I look back on it, I think it had some seeds were planted. In a similar time frame, Dr. Robert Luckey, who was at AT&T all of his career and is still around, retired, but still writing articles and stuff in the Communications Journal, they published a paper on adaptive equalization for improving data rates in binary communications. And I don't believe that there was a direct link between these two groups. But if you look at the concepts, they're quite similar, although this was pointed at general adaptive filtering, and much of Bernard's career work focused on antennas, adaptive antennas, and things like that, where Robert Luckey focused on digital communications on the telephone system and how to get channels equalized to get the data rate at high speeds and so forth. I always thought 1965 versus 1959, this is indication, I believe, of how you have to wait when you're in industry until you clear the patent lines before you publish the work. This appeared in the Bell System Technical Journal at that point. You're probably not all that interested in that. One other comment here is that Ted Hoff went on to be, he wasn't a founder of Intel Corporation, but he was one of the original employees of Intel, probably a co-owner in some regards. He stayed with Intel Corporation his entire career, and he was something like the CTO when he retired some years ago. Okay, so in some sense I'm saying his PhD dissertation didn't make him a wealthy, successful Intel person, but he was good, and he knew what he was doing, and his whole career proved it. So I think that the early days with Professor Woodrow were also Professor Hoff. Okay, now I'm going to move a little quickly through this. Okay, I don't want to bore people, but I want to get our terminology and so forth down. So adaptive systems, adaptive filtering, adaptive noise canceling, whatever we are doing, it always has something to do with using an adaptive filter to identify an unknown system. Okay, that system could be many different things, and we'll treat that as we go along here. But the whole idea is you drive the parallel combination with an input, preferably with a wideband white noise type of input to excite all the modes of the system. And then you compare the outputs, form the error between them, and then do some operation with the error. And the general sense is to use the expected value of the mean squared error. Okay, so this is the formal mathematical thing. I'll show you in a moment what the LMS algorithm did and why it is the most dominant algorithm in the technical world today, okay, but not the only one. The learning curve is the evolution of this mean squared error as a function of time. Here's a picture of a learning curve. So when the filter starts out and it's unadjusted, it's high. If you come from the control area, call it the cost function. It's the same thing, okay? And this is the artist's conception. The filter learns, it's identifying, it's adjusting the parameters, and it comes down to some value where it's stable. And if it's perfectly matched, if this is an nth order unknown FIR system and you're using an unknown FIR filter or an adaptive filter, it'll come down roughly to this minimum value subject to some gradient noise and some computational noise, okay? And in general, this is not a smooth curve. It's jumping around. This is the artist's conception. So I'm going to use this measure to compare certain kinds of performances and move it on from there. This is just a simple, just to show you a picture if you haven't seen this before, simple FIR adaptive filter doing a system identification driven with white noise. You can see this is an experimental model driven on a computer. Some student along the way did that. And you can see it's more or less smooth, but it is noisy, and it comes down here to the noise floor. Okay, background. Where is this used today? I'm not going to dwell on this, but there's a couple of places it is totally used. It totally is used as echo cancellation in telephone channels, okay? And I'll tell you just a little bit more about that one, okay? It's used in, I would say every telephone channel you use has adaptive echo cancelers in it today. High data rate modems. I haven't used a modem per se for quite a while. I'm wireless, but nevertheless, they're in the system. But let me just point out here, in the medical world, they use these kinds of techniques for noise removal of instruments in operating rooms, in the places where intense care monitoring and so forth, because there's so many electrical pieces of equipment in a room that interfere with each other, and they don't want one to confuse the physician. So heavily used there. It has been, let me just jump down, it's heavily used in wireless communications that are based on code division multiple access. Very simple. When you're using your iPhone or whatever wireless device you're using, those signals go out, they bounce off of buildings, there's other signals bouncing around. So noise gets on the channels, they crosstalk, and you have to have some noise reduction to make that iPhone hold on to its signal and work correctly. It's in there and done that. Okay, just kind of motivating it here. This is the classic place, and I just wanted to kind of spend a minute on this. In telephone communications, here's talker 1 at one end, here's talker 2 at the other end. Let's put talker 1 in San Francisco, and let's put talker 2 in Los Angeles, just as an example. The normal process is that between the telephone and the local system, it's two-wire communication. In other words, you've got two wires, essentially. Signals are going both ways, okay? Same way on the other end. But when you start to transmit, especially long distances from San Francisco to Los Angeles, it has to be split into a four-wire system, so they say. Two wires going forward and two wires coming back in order to transmit over microwave and satellite channels and all that sort of thing. And the difficulty that occurs in the system is the hybrid transformer, you might call it right here, that converts from two wire. This is a four-port system, and it has to be balanced in order to make sure that the signal that comes down here is transferred out to talker 2, and the one that talker 2 goes into the same device comes out this way. The problem is with a little bit of imbalance on this, there'll be a leakage path that comes down here like this and goes back to the talker who spoke. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I used to work in, the San Francisco Bay Area, talk to people in Los Angeles all the time at the Lockheed down there and other companies, and virtually most of our voices go through satellite because the landlines are so densely used between those two cities. And when it goes through a satellite, it goes 22,000 miles out into space to a geosynchronous orbit, and it comes back 22,000 miles. It's just gone 44,000 miles instead of 500 miles between the city. And if there's an echo, if I speak into the phone and it goes down here and bounces off and echoes back to me, I get my voice coming back to me in about a half a second. That's roughly a half a second. And if that's strong, I'm so annoyed by it, I put the phone down and redial. I've done that many times. Okay. Now, I haven't had that experience lately because I think our systems are so advanced. Now, here's just a little more detail of what the adaptive echo canceller does. It just, on this side right here, it just, the details aren't here, but it just puts an adaptive filter across here. and it estimates what the signal is coming through here, assuming that this talker is silent. If this talker is talking at the same time that the other one's talking, that can sort of upset the balance of this. But let's make this talker quiet, and then it adjusts the adaptive filter to remove this echo. This is the signal here, and it stays adjusted as long as that guy is talking. Then when they switch, it goes to the other end and so forth. That's the way that the echo cancellation occurs in the normal telephone world. And I would swear that it's on every single telephone channel that any of us use. Okay, a little faster here. The adaptive filter, the one that's used, I would say 99% of the time in practice, is an FIR, a finite impulse response filter. I'm sure everybody knows what that is. Okay, tap the ley line, FIR. Here's the picture of it. Here's the, you have the delays, various samples. The multipliers here, sum them up, form the output of the filter, and then form the error. You get the desired signal in different settings. You get it from different places. Okay, and I won't, you saw where it came from in the echo cancellation. I won't dwell on that. And so the implementation is a filter that has tap weights that vary. So it's a time-varying system, which right away gets us out of the domain of undergraduate systems analysis, because we don't deal generally with time-varying systems. And the LMS algorithm that Widrow and Hoff published and still is with us today is a approximation to the steepest descent algorithm, which I think we all know about steepest descent, where we're adjusting, these are vectors of these tap weights. Okay, so you use the current one and you update it, okay, by using steepest descent on the mean squared error surface. You have a step size associated with it. And of course, the complexity of this is calculating the gradient that goes into the algorithm. So what the gentleman at Stanford did was they did what we engineers often don't want to do. They said, well, if I need to have the cost function that's the estimated or the average, mean squared average, expected value, I'm sorry, that's the word I was trying to get, expected value of the squared error. And they said, well, we can't compute that in real time. It's too costly in those days. So let's just approximate it with the current value of the error, and we'll square that. And to most of us who look at that would say, that's so crude, and so you don't want to do that. It will never work. It does work. And if you go through the process, I won't go through the details here, you come up with an expression, okay, and when you plug it into the steepest descent algorithm, it looks like this. And the whole point here is, well, there's a step size associated with it, and you get to choose and adjust that. But the complexity of the algorithm, it involves a multiplication on, this is delineating each one of the taps with the eye. So each tap has one multiplication in here, so to speak, okay, because you can get these constants put into it. And the complexity of the update is order n. That's the complexity of the filter itself, okay, order n of a FIR filter. So one of the golden rules in adaptive filtering for real-time applications is if you can get an update algorithm that has a same order of complexity or similar to the filter itself, then you're in the ballgame of being able to use it in real time. Okay? If you have more exotic algorithms where this complexity turns out to be order n squared or n cubed, that means you're doing a huge amount more work to update the filter than to filter the data. So those usually are not done in real time. Okay, so we move that along. And okay, I'm not going to go into mathematics here, but I just wanted to make one point, and that is that the behavior of these filters, FIR types of filters, is highly dependent on the autocorrelation of the input signal, and that's the expected value of the outer product. This is an outer product, not an inner product, so it's a matrix, and when you form it, you get the autocorrelation matrix with these different elements in it. Well, why am I telling you that? Just so you know, if you haven't studied this stuff in any detail. The mean squared error surface that we're working on is a quadratic surface with a unique minimum. And well, this is a little cryptic. And you see that here's the W vector transpose an R and a W. So just think of this as W squared and a constant. Okay, it's a quadratic surface is what I'm saying here. And so you will get good, reliable behavior for the most part with this type of an FIR adaptive filter. And that's why it's used in practice so very, very much. It does have some variations. Here's just a little computer simulation of the case. It can be quadratic, but if the noise is colored, it can squeeze the quadratic surface into a long trough, for instance. And if you go down the edge of the trough quickly and then have to go slowly down the trough to get to the minimum, you'll have this kind of a slow performance. But nevertheless, it will get to the minimum. And that's if the input was highly colored. If it's driven with nice broadband white noise, it just goes plop because the bowl is symmetrical, and no matter where you start, it has the same amount of cost to get down to the bottom. Okay. All right, so that's the history of the adaptive filter for the FIR. And I say, if any of you are familiar with the Simon Haken textbook on adaptive filtering, it's almost totally FIR. I think there's virtually one or two homework problems on IIRs. Okay, so I want to move on here now to in the IIR when we're doing adaptive filtering and we need pretty long filters. And this happens in a lot of communication things. We say, can't we use an IIR filter with poles and zeros in order to knock down the computational requirements? And I spent a sabbatical leave at Bell Laboratories in 1984. And one of my things there was to work with the management. But they were 100% FIR in everything. And I was trying to convince them, and just being an academic, you know, that why don't we study and look at, in a research environment, the IIR filters and see how we can do and save money. And today, if I were to make that argument, I would say, let's see how we can do it and save power, because an IIR filter can be implemented in general with a lot less computation, and you won't wear your batteries down as fast. It's as simple as that. Well, the difficulty that arises here, an IIR filter has the weighted inputs, but it also has weighted past outputs, because that gives you the denominator factor and so forth. And when you go through the derivation of the LMS algorithm with the same, other people have done this, it's certainly not our work, and you do the same thing of the approximation that Stanford gentleman used and so forth, you basically get the B coefficients, fine, it comes out. And this little function that does the update, this is sort of a general expression here. It's got a step weight, it's got the error in it, and it's got the various delayed input samples in it. So it's the same. However, the update of these coefficients that weight the past values, which is the denominator polynomial coefficients, if you put it in the Z transform domain, it has the Y in it rather than the X. And the Y, of course, has past values of this. So you immediately deal with non-quadratic surfaces, distorted surfaces, surfaces that have local minimum on them, etc. Okay. So in some sense, this immediately rings bells to say, we don't want to do it. But I keep saying, yeah, we do want to do it, and let's see. IIR filters, as they're adjusting, if a pole, as it's moving around slowly in the Z-plane, if it moves outside the unit circle and stays out there, the whole system becomes unstable. Okay, it's a problem. Well, you can monitor it and handle that to some extent. Feedback causes interplay between movement of the poles in the denominator and the zeros, because they tend to cancel each other out. And when I've watched simulations of this, my students have done over the years, it's similar to you and your associate trying to go through the doorway, right? And you get there, and then you step to the left, and then your associate steps to the left, and you step to the right, and associate steps to the right. And you're like this, and then suddenly you say, oh, and you laugh, and then you go through the doorway. that's exactly what's happening here. I can't tell you why, but they interplay between each other and slow down the process. Okay, and eventually it will generally converge. The mean squared error surface is not quadratic in this case due to the nonlinearity dependence that I showed you of the denominator coefficients. And another effect here is that due to internal feedback, the IRs are much more sensitive to arithmetic quantization. Okay, so round-off error may suddenly raise its voice here and say, I need more word length, okay, in order to do this. That means more power from your batteries. Okay, well, let me move this onward now and just show you an example. Just try an IIR filter like we did here. And while I don't have any time to go into this, watching the time here, almost everything I'm talking about can be extended to 2 dimensions and done on images and video and stuff like that, although it gets very pricey computationally to do that. But here's a simple example of taking a third order IIR 2-dimensional LMS adaptive filtering and do some noise cancellation on an image. Okay, and this was the learning curve, one of the ones we pulled out. Now this is an IIR filter. It's a 2-dimensional filter. It's running across the image, which I'm going to show you, on the diagonal rather than on the horizontal or vertical. And it has very nice convergence properties, and none of those problems pop up in this example that I mentioned in the problem set. Okay, that gives you a little bit of feeling. This is, unfortunately, when it's projected up here, you have trouble seeing this, I think, but this is the classic picture of Lena that's been in the image processing literature for... Is it? Oh, maybe you can see it better there. Okay. Lena is approximately 70 years old now, and she is not an engineer. She was a hotel manager in New England, and in this picture, this is a Playboy centerfold picture where the graduate students cropped it so that they didn't get in trouble. Okay. Now, why am I saying that? I'm just joking with that, but Lena is the classic example used in many, many image processing papers to demonstrate the technique. So that's why my students used this to demonstrate the technique. And this is the original 256 by 268-bit pixel image, quite clear. This is the one with noise added. You can't see it real carefully here, but you may, if you look up in this region, see a noisy, because the filter is coming along. It's a linear predictive filter. It's going diagonal like this. And by the time it's down in this region, it has essentially removed the noise. Okay. And when you get down into here and look at some of these details around in here, you don't see much difference between here and here. There's a little bit of noise in here because it's not perfect. But on the whole, this is an example where an IIR 2D filter very efficiently removes additive noise from an image. Now, that's not a complicated thing to do, and there's other ways to do it. Okay, let me move this to the next thing. Now, in modern times, we're not always comfortable with just a linear adaptive filter, whether it's IIR or FIR. Okay, I'm moving along now and saying that in many cases we have situations that have nonlinearities in them, and we're approximating that with this traditional LMS type of a filter. And I wanted to mention, I don't know how many of you study nonlinear system theory, but just pull out what I need here. And one is the Hammerstein nonlinearity model, and I'll show you an example of that, is a linear filter. It could be IIR or FIR, okay. And then it goes into a polynomial, fixed polynomial nonlinearity. This just indicated it, raise it to the third power, but it could be a general nonlinearity, okay. The Wiener model is the opposite of that, where you do nonlinear functioning on the input signal as it comes in, and then again, it's not filtering, it's just a polynomial thing, and then it's filtered through a linear system. And if you put the two of them together, where you have linear, nonlinear, linear, We refer to that as the LNL, linear, nonlinear, linear model of a nonlinearity. Now, what about this? Okay, I'm going to have to use my optimization algorithms to get these things to work. Here's the classic nonlinear Volterra adaptive filter, and it looks like this. This is just showing the linear kernel, which is just the normal linear filter. There's a constant hanging out here just to generalize it. And this is the second order term where you have products of the signal at different times and another kernel of the filter, which is two-dimensional. Okay. And of course, the Volterra expansion goes on and on and on. But in practice, you probably could not afford to go beyond the second order, maybe the third order in some cases. This is in the literature for a long time, and adaptive filtering people used it many years ago to try it out. Well, this is an extremely general nonlinearity. Okay, this will model virtually all nonlinearities if you add enough terms. It's good for weak nonlinearities because I can get the job done with just a second order filter in here, which is costly but maybe doable. And it has high computation rate, okay, just in general. So all in all, I agree with the Bell Lab management of those days. This will not be used in practical telecommunication channels, okay. How about the, by the way, that one was the Wiener model, because the nonlinearity was done on the input signal and then run through a linear filter. How about a neural network? Well, if I take a single cell model, then you have either a number of sensors or you put a signal through a tap delay line, then you weight these different samples, sum them up, and then put it through a nonlinearity. That's a typical single cell neuron. You can also look at the input multi-layer neurons where they have hidden layers and so forth. But the general features here is that in general, it's a general model, okay. It's much better for stiff nonlinearities, and it has much more modest computational requirements, okay. Many people don't think of neural networks as being adaptive filters, but you can if you want to use them. And they're nonlinear adaptive filters using the Hammerstein model, okay. And if I want to go to the more general level, okay, this model is what is used to model acoustic channels, acoustic paths. I was thinking of it here as a loudspeaker system in my family room at home, you know. I have some sort of a channel here. I'm feeding the signals into the loudspeaker. You drive it hard. There's some nonlinearity in the loudspeaker cones, okay. And then as it transfers across the room, it's going through an environment that's essentially a linear filter. And then you're sitting out here or you have a recorder or something and hears it, it's getting this. So the signal that's coming off of the CD or the old LP or whatever it is going through a channel here that has this characteristics to it. This is similar in satellite communication channels where it's linear up to the satellite. It's nonlinear in the satellite because they're driving it hard into nonlinearity. It's linear back down. It's also true in magnetic recording channels where you're sending bits to a disk. Okay, it's linear for the most part until it gets to the disk, but when it writes on the oxide compound on the disk, there's a nonlinearity there. And then when you read it back, it comes through another linear channel. So you read and write on the disk, again, the same model. So if I want to pack the disks as densely as possible with bits, I better use an adaptive equalizer on this communication channel, and it better be nonlinear, and it better be able to communicate properly and just properly. This is used in virtually all disks that are in our computers, okay, to increase the density of a writing on the disk. Okay, so I don't know the details because I don't have the secret information, but I know that it's there. Now I want to move on now to if we have these surfaces that are not quadratic, they're not unimodal in many cases, what are we going to do about it? Well, if we use any algorithm, an LMS algorithm, RLS algorithm, anything that's gradient based, they're likely to find some difficulties. They're likely to run into a local minimum, and they're in the little local valley, and the gradient won't get them out of there. So once again, probably not a good idea to use that in this situation. These kinds of algorithms are efficient, but they may get stuck in local minimum and not find the global minimum. Okay, so they never adjust correctly. So let's move on to structured stochastic searches. Okay, and some of these stochastic searches you've heard about. Some of you may be familiar with them, and some are still out there to be picked off the tree and used. Okay, in some sense. Okay, this is where you generate parameter estimates in some sort of a random fashion. In other words, you don't take a step that's calculated, you take it randomly, okay? However, you intelligently modify the estimates in a manner that efficiently searches the error space without doing an exhaustive search. We cannot afford to check out every value. We have to have some sort of a direction, and I'll go into this. Okay, now, bio-inspired algorithms, okay? Here's a list of ones that I'm familiar with, and you may have heard about, and some of them you may know about, okay? But let me just give you the idea here. This is the ant colony optimization algorithm, okay? It's in the literature. There's whole books about it. I don't know how much it's used in engineering. It may be, but where it comes from is if there's an anthill in your front yard, and you go out and drop some food 15 feet away from the anthill, okay, and step back, the ants will sense the food supply. They smell it or something like that, and they'll send out a search party, 1,000 ants, and they'll go out all over the place, okay, but sort of in that direction, and within a very, very fast time, they'll find the optimal path to the food source, and they will then send a signal back to the worker ants to go out and get it, and then the big bees come out, big ants come out and take the food back to the nest. Now, how did those ants, that don't seem to be the most intelligent creatures on Earth, figure, how did they optimize that path? And I haven't really experimented with this personally, but we had an anthill in our front yard, and I dropped some food, and they did get the path going. And then I put a log in their path to see what they would do about it, and they couldn't get by through the log. They found their way around, and pretty quickly they're going right around it like that. So people in the computational evolutionary side of things have coded that in mathematical form, and we can use it to optimize using a population. Okay, now I'm not going to dwell on that one. There's one called the cat swarm algorithm, which has to do with the way, let's say, tigers or leopards in Africa perform in the Serengeti, somewhere like that. And I won't spend any time on that, but basically a whole bunch of them sleep under the tree, and a couple of them are on watch, okay? And then when an antelope goes by, the ones who are on watch go tearing after it immediately, but one may not be able to catch it, okay? And the ones that are sleeping get prodded, and suddenly they're up and running. So what's the algorithm? There's a mathematical formulation of that algorithm, and I won't dwell on that one either. There's one down here, because I'm going to dwell on these ones that I have in red for the rest of the time, called the artificial bee colony algorithm. Okay, bees are social insects that are not terribly intelligent from the brain, but they do very, very intelligent things collectively. And I won't mention this too much. I want to stay on these, okay? But this is one I think has not made it very much into the engineering literature. It is in there a little bit. I was sent a paper to review on that, which is when I got familiar with it, and I'll tell you we're going to take a look at it. Okay, what about the genetic algorithm? Well, the genetic algorithm is well known. And again, I'm not going to take the time to try to go through a lot of details in this. Anybody know about the genetic algorithm? A few of you. It's used in all sorts of optimizations. They use it in layout routing and integrated circuit design. It's used in testing of integrated chips and so forth. But the whole idea is, and let me just give you the idea. There's an individual, which is an estimate of the unknown parameters. In other words, the adaptive filter with particular parameters at that moment. And then there's a whole population of these adaptive filters, So you've got a whole bunch of filters, I'm putting in a filtering context, that have different estimates of the parameters, okay? And now you have to evaluate the fitness of each one of those members of the population. So compute the mean squared error. Okay, that's your fitness in the filtering case. And then look at the mean squared error and take the population you have, maybe you have 100 filters, and say, well, we're going to mate them. So we're going to mate them pair by, pseudo-randomly pick them pairs, and we'll mate them, cross over their genes, and we'll then have 200 filters, and we'll throw away the 100 that are least fit. In other words, the ones that have the largest mean squared error. They're not doing well, throw them away. Okay? And then we'll put a little bit of mutation in, okay, in order to put some randomness in the process. So it goes like this. It's if you're going to mate two filters, take each one of their word lengths, pseudo-randomly pick a spot, swap the word lengths at that point. So now the new filter with all these parameters has part of it from one parent and part of it from the other parent. And how do you mutate? You take the lower bits and flick them pseudo-randomly. Take the bottom 5 bits and flick them pseudo-randomly. And it's well known that if this is properly done, it's guaranteed to converge in time to the global minimum. It'll climb hills. The process will climb hills. It throws the unfit members out of the population, whether they're unfit due to genetics or whether they're unfit due to disease or whatever. Okay, so that's the genetic algorithm. Now I want to. That's the bottom line one. It's used a lot. Okay, but I want to spend the rest of the time here to tell you a little bit about the particle swarm optimization algorithm. And this can apply to bees, or it can apply to birds flocking, maybe other insects flocking, but let me sort of put it in the bee context, okay? It's not the bee context that was at the end. That's a little different algorithm. This is the more general one. This came about to be in 1995 by two gentlemen who were in the bioengineering area, really not hardcore signal processing engineers. So it was coming out of the bio side. And it's this particular algorithm, the way bees swarm is if you have a beehive. I happen to have been a kid whose grandfather raised bees, so I used to watch this. But, so in a beehive, you've got these worker bees whose job is to, every time the queen hatches the eggs, they have to kill every one that hatches into a female, because there can only be one queen in the hive. Okay? And then occasionally they either miss killing the queen bee, the new one, or they're revolting. And they say, oh, we want a different queen. This queen's not treating us properly. So suddenly there's two queens, adult queen bees in the hive. They can't stay there. And one of them will pick up and leave and fly away. And when it flies away, all the supporters go with her. And they're flying through the air all over the place in random like this, and then the queen goes and it lands on a tree branch or on a rock, or tree branch is typical, and all the bees will come there, they'll cluster, fly around, and pretty soon they latch on, and pretty soon there are a swarm of bees that are hanging there, okay? And my grandfather would always, when he'd see the bees swarm, he'd rush, get his net and go out and get it, take the swarm back and put it in a different hive so he could create a new hive, okay, and so forth. But the thing is, how do the bees swarm and converge to that global optimum? So that's been mathematically encoded, and I'll show you just a little bit of this and a few examples, okay. This is terribly detailed, I know, but basically I'm going to show you a picture. You have the updates of the parameters. This is the parameter vector. And this, the ith means a particular member of the population, okay? And so they use a term here called velocity vector because the bees are flying, but that's their terminology. But basically there's two vectors that are used here. There's a memory kept of the best mean squared error of all the ith order positions of that particular member of the population. In other words, this particular bee flies all around, and at each iteration, he's the ith bee, say. You've got a particular mean squared error, and you remember what the minimum was that this bee found. And then you compare them, and this global best over here is the minimum of the whole group of bees. They have their cell phones, so they communicate back to each other and so forth. And the update algorithm is taking a vector that's controlled by the best of the whole group and another vector that's controlled by the best of that particular individual, and take a linear combination of that, and the picture looks like this. Okay, so this is probably the easiest picture to see. Here's the G-best in the, well, I won't get into the details, the XY plane here. Here's a location of the best found of the whole group, and here's the location. I'm going to update the values of the ith bee, okay? And here's the best that the ith bee has found. So what you do is you use this vector and this vector to delineate the section that you're going to step into, and then you take a random step in that direction. It can be anywhere in there, but it can't be out. And what happens over time is the ith one converges to the best of the group. So these vectors close over time like that. And eventually it will reach the global minimum. Okay. It has never been proved, as far as I could ever determine in the literature, that this is globally convergent. Okay. But experimentally, it virtually is. Okay. Now, here's an example where this is a nonlinear example. I won't go into the details. It's a nonlinear. This is the error surface. There's two parameters here, this one and this one, that are being estimated. So it's a simple two-dimensional. And this happens to be the global minimum of this error surface. But you can see there's all kinds of hills, valleys, local minimum, so that a gradient algorithm could never move on this surface in general. And the population here, I don't know, it's about 15. I think of each. The green ones are the experiment with the genetic algorithm, and the red ones, or purple ones that you see, are the experiment with the particle swarm algorithm. Okay, and this is just the picture where we randomly threw them out to get started. Now let's see if this runs correctly. It should. Did before. Okay, it started and it's going. Now they're converging. The algorithm's converging. And you're seeing that in this case, the particle swarm algorithm is converging more quickly, okay, more precisely. The genetic algorithm is taking longer. It's converging. Where we stopped here, it's within a small distance here. It would have eventually come over to that. It's running again, just another. This is just an example of the particle swarm optimizing on a multi-modal surface. Okay, so here's the question then that comes up. Here's another example. Keep an eye on this. Another example is how much does it cost to do this? Okay, and how well does it work in our kinds of a problem? So here's a case of a classical example taken from the literature of a nonlinear surface of a simple filter. Here's the unknown plant. It's a third order. You're approximating it with an adaptive filter. It's an IIR. You see it's got poles and so forth. The input signal's colored in this case and so forth. And the local minimum is here, and the global minimum is here. And this is the coefficient. This is the stability region of the coefficients. So if you looked at the surface, it's kind of like a little valley here, and it goes over a mountain and down into the deep valley where it is the minimum down here. Now, the examples in the literature when people were trying to prove their algorithms worked well, they put it over here in the valley, started out. Any gradient algorithm would stay in the valley. But here's an example of the genetic and particle swarm working. So this is the mean squared error. You're not seeing the surfaces, but It starts out over here at some value, and it's actually climbing over the hill, and it's coming over to the minimum value. And this one is showing the particle swarm algorithm operating with different numbers in its population. So it's 40, 60, 80, 100. And one of the things that we noticed immediately is we're in the level of diminishing returns. Okay, there's no use using 100. 40 almost does the same thing, almost. And how about if we push this down farther to get the population and the cost down? And you can do that. So here is, there are some, I want to mention a couple of problems with the standard PSO and how we want to modify it a little bit in order to make it work better. Now this is our research at this point, okay? So there's a problem in general if somehow the G-best gets stuck outlying. It may cause the whole thing to be very slow, and in some cases it'll stagnate and it won't actually converge. Stagnant particles can have the same thing, and you can have premature convergence to a local minimum and some amount of redundancy in the process. Okay, so we found that the conventional particle swarm was not doing what we wanted to do all the time, although it had the property. So we put in variations of it, and I won't dwell on these, but we every time you get a G-best for a while, at some point you take a small fraction of the population and you re-randomize it in a small area around G-best to make it robust. We put in some mutation on each particle, etc. I won't dwell on all this. And I'll show you a few examples. These small variations, which we're taking from other algorithms, make it work much better. That's a picture of it. Here's the example of this particular plant. This is a linear IIR plant. It's not real complicated. It's an IIR filter, if you want to think of it. We're trying to identify that. And the original particle swarm came down here, and it kind of stagnated. Okay, it converged quickly, but at kind of a high level of error. The genetic algorithm, okay, again, it's somewhat a function of what parameters you get. It came down pretty well. It works pretty well, okay? And we tweaked the modified particle swarm by adding this mutation, re-randomization, and so forth. And we could make it, tweak it up so it worked considerably better than either of the other ones, okay? So there's a message here I want to get across on this. This is just another example, and I'm not going to have time to dwell on all of these because we're now time for questions, but this is another example where the original particle swarm worked pretty well, but again, it stagnated a little bit high. Genetic, similarly, the modified one worked a little bit better, okay, and so forth. So let's see what I got here. Okay, another one. This is basically the summary of what's going on, but let me just verbalize it, okay? What we had discovered is that when we take an algorithm from the literature, use it on our problems, and think that it's going to work, it worked pretty well, but not as well as we wanted, okay? So we started stepping back now and saying, well, how about if we use some of the features from other algorithms combined with it? Let's make hybrid algorithms. So for instance, there was one here where we used the particle swarm algorithm and add a term in that's similar to the LMS error, and that LMS error will always drag it to the global minimum. What happens is the particle swarm algorithm, I can't say always, but let me say most of the time, gets it to the local minimum, the global minimum bowl. And once it's in the global minimum bowl, the LMS then is capable to pull it down to the bottom, okay? And we see that. And the other thing we learned about the particle swarm as compared to the genetic, and this is not provable, but we find in general that it converged better with smaller numbers of in their population as did the genetic algorithm. Okay, in other words, to get the same performance, we usually had to have maybe 50 in the population of the genetic and maybe 10 in the particle swarm would do the same job with the right tweaking. So we can't prove that. I'm just saying that that's experimental. So one of the things I want to leave us on here, and this is about where I'm going to wrap us up here, is that one, there's lots of reasons why we need to press adaptive signal processing on to use either infinite impulse response systems or nonlinear systems in order to solve problems that exist with us today. If we're going to do that, we need to go on with the more advanced algorithms, and we're finding that these bio-inspired optimization algorithms generally are designed to work. They take more computation, agreed, it's a population-based thing, but they can climb hills and find global minimum, and so they can solve the problem if we can computationally get away with it. The other point I wanted to make is that I mentioned cat swarm algorithm, ant colony algorithm, genetic algorithm, and if you step back, think about that a little bit, these must be isolated examples in a continuum of algorithms, okay? And so I should not at all hesitate to look at one algorithm that works well for me and another algorithm that has good properties and do a hybrid combination of them, okay? And that puts me somewhere in between those two algorithms in the set that doesn't have a point on it, okay? So I think that there's a lot of interesting research that could be done to try to figure out how do I, in certain problems, and how do I select algorithms and combine them to get the ultimate property that I need in order to get everything working well and so forth. And then the last thing I'd just like to close on, the idea of reaching out into the bio area and get bio-inspired optimization is great. There's many other places to look too, okay? And you know, we'll do this eventually. The simulated annealing algorithm, which is well known, is an example. It's not bio-inspired. It's simulated cooling metals and how the molecular structure works. So what I'm saying is there's many other places we can go out and either borrow a look, and some of the things that we do might be taking over into the areas that they want to do in order to get certain things done in the other fields too. So with that, I'll stop right here and say I hope I haven't driven you to death with all these nuances, but I think the concept that adaptive filter is here to stay, it's in our everyday lives, it's limited by certain constraints. We need to go beyond that. We need to do research to take us beyond that. There's lots of opportunities to do that in my way of thinking. So when I submit my NSF proposal, it should get funded. I'm joking. Not everybody's going to agree with that. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
I wonder how these population-based algorithms work online. So, because, for example, you have 20 population and you need to evaluate each of them.
Yes.
So, in the gradient descent-based, you just you have the current, for example, values of weight, and the signal comes from the outside, and you know how better your filter was performing, and you update it based on that. But here, you need, at each iteration, you need to, for example, evaluate it to the number of the population.
That's
so
correct.
How it's
So there's no doubt that it's costly in that sense, okay? However, it is linearly costly. In other words, if I have to double it, it doubles. If I need 100 rather than 50, I more or less have to do twice the amount of computation, right? So it's linear. And the other thing is that if it's a gradient algorithm, and people have tried to use cooperating gradient filters together. There's been a lot of work on that. In some cases, they work well. But if you're in a very bad situation of the surface and you're in a bad area, they may never get out of that area. So it's like you've got to pay the price to do the population of it.
Conventional PSO didn't work well on some problems, and you, for example, did some changes to that, so we put some more randomness in that, initialize that random. So The same thing can be done in gradient descent. So you can step you are moving at each step. You can put some randomness.
It's a good point, and actually, in a sense, that's what the simulated annealing algorithm does. You familiar with the simulated annealing? That's an algorithm which I'm not sure it calculates the gradient per se, but what it is it will only go downhill unless the temperature schedule is at a certain place, and it'll let the filter go uphill for a while. So that one can be adapted to climb out of a local minimum in some cases, but you're not having a population of filters to do it. So I think it's a good point, and maybe there are other ways to use gradient algorithms or other things and not have a population. But on the other hand, a population of bees and ants can do a very sophisticated job that a single ant could never do. You know, so it's like somehow you're getting their heads together to do something. And
It's been proven.
Huh?
Improved it.
Improved it. Social biology, I don't know. You know, not very knowledgeable. But,
Any other questions?
anybody working on any of these algorithms for other reasons? I can tell you why I raised that question, because Russell knows this from the department. I'm still in, he was in before he came down here. But I learned after my students were working on it, whoops, the guys upstairs doing antenna design are using particle swarm optimization for sparse antennas for wireless situations. Okay, they were actually using for antenna design. Well, that's not too surprising, but it's kind of interesting that we were both doing it in the same department, not even talking to each other until we found it out. Then I learned that Kwang Lee, our professor in the power systems area, he was using these algorithms to optimize the control of, you know, large grid power systems, and they were using particle swarm optimization there too. So it's kind of like it's a core of some sort of optimization technique, and if you need to optimize, then these algorithms are potential. But within virtually all my work and my students' work focuses on real-time signal processing, and so we're very constrained about too much computation. Or
I do have a question, though. I guess. What about the stability issue? You haven't. I guess we haven't revisited it since the beginning of your talk.
Okay, this is a good point. Okay, it boils down to this: if a member of the population is headed toward instability, okay, it will give a poor cost function. Well, I'm thinking of the genetic here, really, and it'll be removed out of the population because of that. And the particle swarm, I can't say it in quite the same terms, but it seems like anything headed to stability is not in that closing area, so it's avoided, it's neglected, and things like that.
Can you prove that? Or?
No, I don't think I can. No. And one of the things, yet, one of the things that I had my student do, Gene Krasinski, we started out, first of all, when we read the literature, a genetic algorithm, it's been proven that the genetic algorithm converges to the global optimum. So I said to Dean, go read that and then reproduce that for the particle swarm algorithm. Well, the genetic algorithm, what the proof says is that from a probabilistic point of view, what it's doing, it's in a finite setting. You have a finite number of genes. Well, we do with finite word lengths too, and what it says that in due time, that algorithm will visit every single member of the population on a statistical basis. And so it's statistically globally convergent because it will eventually get there. Now, the particle swarm algorithm, you could put it in that setting, but it isn't. The parameters that were specified are real numbers in general. So it's not a finite space, okay? Unless, if you want to quantify it, say, okay, I'll do it with 16 bits of word length, maybe a proof could be done, but we searched the literature and there's no existing proof that it reaches the global optimum. There is a proof that they come together, it converges together. And you saw that when these things were converging up here at the high line. That's proved that it converges to a unique solution, but it's not proof that the unique solution, obviously it isn't from what we see, that the unique solution may not be the global minimum. It may be stagnated away from the global minimum. That required us to put in some other things that may make sure we get there.
Any other questions? Well, if not, let's...
Well, thank you very much for
speaker
listening
again.
to this. And